What's up, guys? This episode of the Kind of Funny Gamescast is brought to you by Omaha Steaks and Tipsy L's. Tipsy L's, as you can see, wearing the beautiful sweater right now. Everyone should have an ugly Christmas sweater this time of year. Tipsy L's sweaters are all about fun, but are serious on quality and construction. Shop now so you have the best selection to choose from and have it in time for your ugly Christmas sweater party. They also have other holiday and collegiate attire and adult onesies, so get on that. You can get 20% off anything you order on the site by going to tipsyelves.com and enter code GAMECAST to checkout. That's tipsyelves.com with code Gamecast. No S, not Gamescast, Gamecast. Then Omaha Steaks. So here's the deal. Last month, Omaha Steaks sent us a family gift pack with 2 filet mignons, 2 top sirloins, 2 boneless pork chops, 4 boneless chicken breast, 4 kielbasa sausages, 4 burgers, 12-ounce package, all beef meatballs, 4 potatoes au gratin. How do you say that, Greg?
Au gratin. Who cooks
All gratin, caramelized apple tartlets, 1 Omaha Steak seasoning packet, plus 4 additional kielbasa sausages, and we had a damn feast courtesy of Greg Miller. Yeah. Thanks, Greg Miller. It was awesome. You can get yours by going to omahasteaks.com, enter code GAMES in the search bar, add the family gift pack to your cart to get a 77% savings. It's the gift guaranteed to be a hit. So yeah, omahasteaks.com, enter code GAMES. What's up, guys? Welcome to the first ever episode 97 of the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Yeah, we got to do the math
Getting
on this.
deep up in it.
100's coming up soon.
Yeah,
It'll be one of the ones we recorded for the break.
For the break. That'd be fun. I want to do it because I
just do a
spoke
clip
about
show.
this before. For 100?
Yeah, just
No, 100. I want us to do our 100 best games of all time, where we just sit there and come up with it on the spot.
Okay.
And like do the behind the scenes list video that everyone always talked about doing at IGN, but it was a horrible idea to do that.
You couldn't record.
I'm glad
But we're gonna do it.
I'm glad we don't have any sense of self-control. Can we pull up Google spreadsheets back here and
Yeah, we can
build
do
it
it.
behind us? And
We can do whatever the hell we want.
Well, I guess Kevin will do it, but Kevin's
Yeah,
handwriting's
that'll be
so
fun.
bad.
And it's, just freaking, it's just the 100 games that we,
The
no,
100
I don't
games.
want to list them or rank them.
Yeah,
Just us deciding on 100 games.
the 100. We'll call it
The
the
100. The Kind of Funny
CW
100.
wrote a show about this. The
They
100.
did. They did. As always, I'm Tim Gettys, joined by the coolest dudes in video games, Colin Moriarty and Greg Miller.
Na 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 na.
That was good. I liked that. How you guys doing?
I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
well,
Tim?
thank you.
Good. I'm pretty good.
I'm tired. I've been staying up these last few nights playing games till late.
I feel you, dude. I fucking feel you.
I'm
Yeah.
very well rested.
All I want to do right now, Final Fantasy 15. It's
Yeah.
at home. It's here. It's
Yeah.
playable. People have beaten it. I haven't beaten it.
Sure.
I
We
mean,
got the
half-
credits.
I am in the fucking credits.
How long is it
What?
supposed to be?
So that's the thing. We'll get into this topic is Final Fantasy 15.
What up, everybody?
To get through the rigmarole real fast, this is the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Each time we get together to talk about video games, all the things we love about them. You can get it early on patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, or you can get it later on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. Either way, Patreon producer Steven Insler loves you and
The homie.
respects you, just like we do. So thank you for all of that stuff. I hope you guys are all enjoying Final Fantasy 15. And if you're not, I'm sorry for you. You have no soul and you don't love anything in life. Final Fantasy 15, man. I'm fucking
here.
so stoked about
All
this.
your dreams are here. They're coming
Finally,
true.
and I'm loving it. To answer your question of how long it is, it seems like it's all over the place. There's so many side quests, and the game's kind of built around side quests, very similar to like a Witcher 3 and games like that in the last couple of years. So how long does it take to beat it? Ranges from 15 hours to 60 hours.
15 hours?
Yeah, so people there was a post I saw on Kotaku, I want to say, where a whole bunch of people were tweeting how long it took them to beat it, and it really was all over the place.
15
But
hours.
we're getting down into like the I think there was even some that were like 12 or 13.
That's
But
got to be the shortest Final Fantasy game then.
But that's if
ever,
you're
right?
just barreling
Mainlining.
through it.
Oh,
you
of
know?
course. But I mean, like without speedrunning and exploiting the games, you can't beat any of them, I think, in that short amount of time, I don't think. Maybe the very old ones, but not.
Yeah.
I can't imagine getting through 4, 5, 6 or any of the ones after that in less than.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with just how games are set up now, where side quests are part of the game. Like they're like in the older Final Fantasy games, they were way more actual side quests, and they were totally optional. Whereas here, they're optional, but kind of, part of the main thing. Like
That cat will die if you don't feed it.
exactly. But I think that it's been fun for me to play through, and like I do care more about the main quest than I do a lot of the side things. But I find myself getting sucked into them a lot, where I'm just like, oh, fine, I will feed the fucking cat. Although I didn't feed that cat.
You better go back tonight.
I tried to feed the cat, but didn't catch the right kind of fish.
Wouldn't work.
Now that's when I get on this cat's bad side right away. I'll tell you right now. If you're a starving cat and I bring you a fish, you're gonna eat this fucking fish. I don't care what color it is.
I mean, we just assumed the cat's hungry. What if he just wasn't hungry? Prompto's there, just like he wants the yellow fish. It's like, how do you know? You don't speak cat.
Great point.
You're not Eliza Thornberry.
Maybe he has pain from a tumor growing inside of him, and that's why he's meowing.
Oh my god. Why can't Prompto sense that?
Yeah, that's the thing. How you guys feeling about it? How long has everyone played?
About 2 hours.
I'm like an hour 15.
I'm 8.5 hours.
Woo!
And I was trying to get through and beat it. I'm on chapter 5, about to be done with chapter 5.
Wow, you're going quick, huh?
But I just want to I want the experience of it. I'll go back to the side quests and stuff later. But I hit a wall where I'm like, fuck, I need to grind. I need to train. I need to, because I hit a dungeon and I'm just like, I'm getting my fucking ass handed to me. And it's just like, I don't think it's even possible for me to progress there. And I was looking at where everyone else online, where their levels are at. And like, there's people in like chapter 3 and they're like level 30. And I'm like,
what level are you?
Low 20s, like 21, I think.
Yeah, you're outpacing the probably the design intent.
Definitely. And it's like, that was one of the moments where I'm like, we've been asking ourselves, is this Final Fantasy? What is Final Fantasy? That moment's Final Fantasy to me. Sure. The moment where I come across something where I'm like, oh, this game's easy. I'm just kind of going through and it's just, the typical RPG. There's the easy enemies and there's the boss fight. And every once in a while, there's a minor challenge, but everything's pretty simple. But then you hit a wall and you're like, oh, fuck, I need to grind.
Shouldn't be in this area.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been having a great time with it.
Yeah, I popped it in last night after playing Last Guardian for a while, and I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And I'm enjoying the combat of it. That's what I was talking to Colin about today. Like, when I went to the tutorial and I was expecting, all right, here comes a really boring fucking tutorial, right? But the gameplay I think's really cool, and I'm like, holy shit, this is actually fun, and I like this, and I like the whole, holding the block, dodging all their attacks, and then parrying at the right time, or doing the warp strike and doing all these different moves that I remember Ryan Clements being a huge fucking dork and talking about, but I didn't ever want to go play Decidium, do Cockum, and know what the fuck any of this warp quantum breaks were. So playing through that, I was like, oh shit, this is a lot of fun. Start the game proper, right? And immediately it's just like, all right, cool. Like, I want to go combat. I want to go into this and stuff. And it's like when they're pushing the car and like the whole scene with his father and whatever. I'm like, all right, well, you're being a brat, but whatever. Go ahead. Let's go. All right, cool. We're in the car. The Florence and the Machine starts playing. Yeah, I've heard about this for a long time. But like their conversation, like this is what I was telling Colin. Shutting my eyes and listening to the conversation, I'm like, all right, cool. Ignis is a bitch. I don't like his little accent. I don't like his attitude either. He's got a fucking attitude. But Prompto's my boy. Gladius, my boy. All right, cool. These guys are cool so far.
Gladiolus.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
My apologies.
Well, it's Gladiolus, right?
Yeah.
When I open my eyes, though, well, it's a dumb name. So Glad.
It is.
We're gonna call him Glad. All right. When I open my eyes, right, and I look at this though, it's just like there's this weird, it's black and white. This juxtaposition of like them in their leather outfits and their crazy ass hair, but walking through the desert and then running into people who are dressed like normal human beings, and then it's like what. I want to like you. And again, tip of the sword here. You know what I mean? I had never done this tutorial, so I did all the tutorials. Then I jumped in. I'm watching all the cutscenes and playing all the thing. I left off last night before jumping over to get the last Watch Dogs Online trophy, where we got our car back. We took our selfie in front of it. So not deep into this game at all. So I'm hoping the fact that I like Prompto so much and I like how they all interact together, I'm going to continue to like the game. But like when it was like, all right, cool, go off on this thing and do that, I'm like, all right, cool. And we're just running through the desert in these like leather coats with half of Michael Jackson glove on. I'm just like, this is weird. And I was bitching around and calling her live. And everybody's like, well, you can change the costumes. Well, I'm like, can I change them to normal clothes and have them run around like what the other people are dressed as? I don't know. It's a question for you.
I don't know. I just kept them.
And it's just like, that's the part of like, it's weird to be playing this game and be like, I can't wait for the next battle. I can't wait to unlock the next, ability point or whatever. I can't wait to level up. But be like, all right, well, it's weird. Let's get the car back. Maybe that'll help. Maybe if we're driving around in the car, that'll help. I'm not sure how I'm feeling.
I was so excited last night when I was playing and I saw Greg Miller's playing Final Fantasy 15. The journey begins. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely, though, it was that thing of, I finished it, or I finished my play session, and then jumped into Watch Dogs to try to finish off this platinum, or at least make sure the online trophy wasn't broken, because I now only need the last mission. That way I can get it done and just be committed to Final Fantasy and not feel like I'm being pulled back to that other game.
Yeah. My thoughts on what you're saying about the juxtaposition is I 50% agree with you, because they're Kingsguard people and whatever. So
I know.
It's like, cool. And they had that the throwaway line.
They have a throwaway line of like, oh, wear them and be proud or whatever.
And it's like, my thing is like, they're obviously from a very privileged royal space, and they are going into rural random ass motherfucking places. So there's going to be a difference.
But I'd be fine with if it was like, those people were in raggedy outfits, but they come out and they look like they're just wearing our clothes. I'm like, wait a second.
So I mean, I don't know I'm like, I'm a little more forgiving about, but what I don't like, and I was telling Colin about this, I think on PS I Love You, I feel like their voices are awesome. I love the voices. I love the characters. I love the writing. I love it. I mean, I feel like he is the one that I like the least, I would say, out of all of them in terms of character.
He's breaking my heart because he looks like he should be Egon Spengler from the real Ghostbusters, but then he opens his mouth and he's British and he's kind of got a chip on his shoulder.
He's real British. Voice actor, same guy that does Junkrat in Overwatch, which is fascinating. Anyways, the writing I love, and the characters and their interactions I am over the moon for. Totally in. That's why I love this game. But seeing those voices come out of those character designs, it just doesn't fit, especially with Noctis for me. And it's one of the things where I'm like, often, like I'll hear the voice and the closing your eyes thing, I'm like, totally in this. But then you see them, and it's not even so much that I'm mad at the designs. It's just that I don't feel like the voice and character fit that look.
Yeah. And that's distressing that you're 8 hours in and feel that way, because that's how I feel now. And I was like, oh, eventually I'll adjust and this will, be that character to me.
But I mean, my thing is, it's just like, it's not that big of an issue for me. All the other things matter more, the character interactions and the actual gameplay. Writing. Yeah. I mean, I don't even just talk about just the characters. Like their designs not matching up with that. It's kind of like, I feel like a lot of that is symbolic of the problems this game has. And I don't like that we're starting off talking so negatively about it. Like, I love this game so far. 8.5 hours in, totally in. This is exactly what I wanted it to be to an extent. I'm so happy with it. It's definitely, I did not think that Final Fantasy 15 would be in my Game of the Year consideration so far. Absolutely is in that conversation. But the big problem for me is that this game feels so ambitious, and it feels like it's trying to be so big and do so many different things. And you see them, and they did really good at a lot of them. This game is very similar to Uncharted 4 in many ways. This game is very similar to Witcher 3 in a lot of ways. This game is very similar to all these other games. And I feel like most of it, they just nailed so much of it, and then they just didn't get that last bit. Like, seeing characters talk, I think I'm so disconnected from it because the lip syncing is bad.
Sure, that's also true.
And I'm used to games of this caliber, Uncharted 4, being like, oh, wow. Like, I trust that character is speaking to me. This, it seems a bit more like it's dubbed over.
100%.
And it takes you out a little bit. And there's just like a lot of like weird control things where it's like the combat is an action game, but it's not. So it's like you kind of expect it to play a certain way, but then you're running around, and every time you go to pick up an item and it's like hit X, you're just standing there jumping, and you're just trying to pick up the damn thing. It's like the button configurations are a little rough in some ways. And I highly recommend you go into the options and change it to type B or type C controls. It makes it way better.
What's
way
wrong
easier
with
to control.
Just the jumping thing?
Well, a big issue is the type A by default, the square is to defend and circle is to attack, which means you can't do both. You can't immediately switch from one to the other. Whereas like type C, you're using the L2 and R2.
Oh, okay.
So it's way easier to be able to use the analog stick to aim at your next target and be able to defend from one thing, hit the next guy, and keep moving. It makes it way more fluid. And also, I recommend going into the options and turning on wait mode, because that allows you to, if you stop moving, everything stops, and you can kind of read the field and see what people's weaknesses are and like kind of come up with a plan. It makes it more like a Final Fantasy game.
Gotcha. See, yeah, not knowing a Final Fantasy game, which is something we've talked about, right? Like, I like that it's just pandemonium. Now, granted, again, I'm just like, fighting scorpions in the desert or whatever. I'm like, just slashing everything, warp striking all over the place, often to the wrong area because I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's I only played for 2 hours. You can't possibly form any sort of coherent opinion about the game in 2 hours. That said, I have impressions of it that I think are worthwhile. First of all, I like the depth of it. I think that this game in a lot of ways is a direct reaction to 13. And in terms, 13 was not deep. 13 had the combat was deep, but nothing else about it was very deep. Obviously, it was a very linear game, a very boxed-in game. Even things like with like equipment and stuff like it just didn't have any depth to it. And that really did start with 7, actually. I mean, 7, when you go back and play, you have like a weapon and an accessory and materia. I mean, it's not as deep as having like 4 or 6 where you're equipping different weapons on different characters and you have different accessories and different helmets and all, like, so I like the idea of having like some sort of depth. And I also like the experience system. I like that you like basically keep your experience until you go rest, and then depending on what you're doing or where you are, you get more experience or level up more. And I think that's really cool. And I was reading that in the end game, you can get something like 3 times as much experience by resting in certain hotels and stuff. So I think that's actually a pretty neat thing. That it gives you an idea of or a time rather to go into the menus and craft your characters and use your AP and all that kind of stuff on the sphere grid or whatever the fuck it is they call it. So,
which is awesome.
Yeah,
I love it. I think that it's such a good system. Like, I love the sphere grid in 10, but this one, man, I like that you don't need to start in the center and get all over the place. It's like there's the different tabs, and you get more and more tabs as you play.
And it seems like they all overlap. Like, you're doing it for everybody in a lot of ways, which I think is cool too. Mm-hmm. And I was reading about I think Jason Schreier and Kotaku put up a piece about what you should go after first, and there's certain things or whatever, and I haven't really been doing that. I've just been going after what I think is best. But so I like that. I like the systemic depth of the game, and I really do think it's reactionary to 13. And I think that they made a wise decision to make it deeper and to make it harder. I think the game is just clearly a harder game than 13, and in that way, I think that, well, it speaks to me on that level because these games are supposed to be hard. You're supposed to grind, and not maybe to the extent of Dragon Quest, but Final Fantasy games were never really easy. People might remember Final Fantasy IV being dumbed down for us when it was on Super Nintendo, but when it came out on DS sometime later, they ramped up the difficulty to where it should have been. And you remember, like, wow, Final Fantasy really does have a difficult heritage that goes far beyond just unfair battles and all that kind of stuff. I also really like the world in a vacuum. I think the world is cool. And I was telling you, and you were surprised, although I haven't really been seeing some other people say it, but I don't know, to me, I'm like, I just feel like the specific desert area that we're in, I'm like, I just feel like this is kind of like, I don't want to say kind of like Final Fantasy 12, but I get a 12 vibe just from the geography. Like, not from the buildings, not from the cars. It's nothing like that in 12, but I just was like, maybe it's because we're in this world in 3D or whatever. Maybe if we were in Figaro in Final Fantasy 6 and we saw that rendered in 3D, it would look just like this. And so maybe I would also draw a correlation to that, but we didn't see it like that. So I like that specific part about it as well. The reason this game doesn't have its hooks in me yet, and I tweeted about that before, and the reason why I've just not been playing it very much, is because there's just certain parts of it that I think are dissonant. To kind of expand on Greg's point, the world doesn't fit with the characters, doesn't fit with the story, doesn't fit with, like, none of these themes actually match. And I feel like the world in the game was built, and then they're like, what can we put in the world? And then, like, what is the story of the world? But none of them really seem to vibe with each other. Like, I don't even know who the fuck these characters are. I mean, I'm like paying attention to the story. I'm like, who are these people? Like, I understand like the whole vibe and what they're doing and their quest, I guess. But I liked how Final Fantasy games introduced you to people. They took time to show, like, we were talking about 6, which I think is one of the great games of all time. And I don't think a lot of people would dispute that. You start with Locke and Terra and you get to know them, right? And then you slowly get to know, well, you find Edgar. And so you get a little bit of time with Edgar, and then you get a little time with Sabin and all sorts of stuff. And then so you get to know everyone and how they fit together and why they belong in this world. And in this particular game, you don't, like, it's really the first Final Fantasy game where this is your party forever. This is your party, and you start from the second one with them. And I think that's weird because I like games where it's like 30 hours in, this new guy, Edge in Final Fantasy IV or something like that, or Yuffie or Vincent in Final Fantasy VII, where they just come in and it changes the dynamic and it changes the game and they change the story and it changes the meaning when they're in the party. But so I think I think that's lost on some people. When I see people, I was reading our friend Vince's review and other people's reviews, and I'm like, they're really talking about the characters, and I appreciate that people like the characters, but as a Final Fantasy game, that's actually one of the major things that's missing for me. Is I'm like, these characters are weird, not because they're dressed in leather or because they're bros or anything like that, but because I don't understand how they even fit, and I know we'll get to that later, but usually you kind of build that story in your mind as you go. And so I think that that's one of the things that's lost in the game. And I think structurally, we have to have a conversation as players. And I think Square Enix has to have the conversation internally about what a Final Fantasy game is. And like, I'm not begrudging this game existing. And I'm not saying that Final Fantasy can't be whatever they want it to be, because obviously Tabata and those guys feel like, the Final Fantasy disease and all that kind of stuff that they have to make their games. But I'm like, what? Like, is Final Fantasy just whatever the fuck we want it to be now? Like moving forward, like, is there nothing that is going to draw us in. The combat's different. The world is open. It's very Western inspired. That's all great, but that kind of bothers me too, because I feel like when you play a Final Fantasy game, at least when I did when I was a kid, and some people have pointed out to me that I haven't truly liked a Final Fantasy game in over 15 years, and that's true. It wasn't really since the PS1 era that I really loved a Final Fantasy game, and I did like 12 because I didn't like 10. I think maybe I was compensating a little bit and being like, well, 12 is fantastic, but it's not. But I feel like it's like a glove, like an old glove you find in the drawer and you put it on and it still fits. And we're so far removed actually from that particular heritage that I'm like, well, what does it mean? We've talked about this in the past with Dragon Quest and how I think that Square Enix does a much better job of, even with 10, aside from 10, making it feel like, well, it's a Dragon Quest game. We might change it, but it's Dragon Quest. And so I think that they have to ask those specific questions. But I'm glad people like it. I want to continue to go into it with an open mind. I think that there's a lot to build on and a lot of intrigue in the game. I think what's going to end up happening to me, because I've been reading a lot of things, is there's a lot of people that have no idea what this is going on in the story. And I don't even know who the characters are. Like, I don't even know, like you're saying Noctis. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. It's one of them. I know. I think he's the main character, right?
Yeah, he's the prince.
So I'm trying to learn, and that's my own deficits too. But I think what I'm going to do with this game, it reminds me of the way I played a lot of other games that I actually really loved, like Amalur or something like that, where I'm like, I don't really care about the story. Mm-hmm. I'm just in this world, and I'm going to figure it out as I go, and then build on that. So I think it's positive and negative, and we'll see how it all ends up. I think that my major problem though is the dissonance of the components of the world and the story, and the kind of thrusting these characters on you without really any context.
Yeah. Going off of that, I feel for me, that was a surprise in both a positive and negative way. Negative in the sense that after the 10 years of seeing trailers for this game, like I wanted the story. Like there were so much things that we've seen that aren't in this game. They instead are in the Kingsglaive movie or in they're just straight up cut and just changed up or whatever. And like, I mean, for example, this is really early on in the game, and we've seen it a million times in trailers, so it's not really spoilers. But the capital getting like ransacked, and just like the big event where there's that fight and confrontation, like we've seen so many times in trailers, like the bros being part of that and like that happening. And it's like for it to be just kind of like a throwaway like cutscene in this, it kind of is like, oh man, like this story really doesn't matter, and that was surprising to me in a bad way because I'm like, oh, I wanted to care. But it was surprising in a good way when I'm like, all right, cool. They are admitting the story doesn't matter. This stuff is just a means to an end of it's about the characters. You're going on this adventure, and it is about you learning about them as they go. I like that it is just the four dudes. You go, and there's not too much backstory. Granted, I had watched the movies and anime before, and I'm pretty well educated on who they are, and so I know. So I'm a little biased when it comes into it because I don't know what the experience is like for somebody that just has no idea who the fuck they are.
Man, I don't.
But I feel like you will in 8 hours, and I think that that's what's cool. They do a good job of every single car ride taking advantage of it, and them constantly chattering and constantly like using nicknames to talk to each other, like calling Ignis Iggy, like instantly makes him more endearing. It's just like, oh, this fucking asshole butler guy, but it's like, oh, but these dudes see him as Iggy.
And that's the great point, that he's going to grow up to be a butler. You act like that, you talk like that, that's all you're ever going to be is a butler. Mm-hmm. Don't be like this Iggy kid, guys. Be fun. Don't be a stick in the mud. He's a stick in, be prompt. Everybody loves, he's Michelangelo.
Come the fuck on.
Come on.
Running around with them selfies and shit. I love that.
I love the fact that he's taking photos.
He's so great.
Going through the menu and looking at like the photos from my battle and all the stuff that he's taking. I'm like, that's fun.
But my thing is, my favorite thing so far about the game is I think it's fun. I think it's fun to be in the world, and I love the entire world, not just the actual like location that they are, but the characters and the idea that there's all these different cities that are connected and they all work together. When I played a lot of the other Final Fantasy games, it kind of just felt like a bunch of villages next to each other that were just there. Some of them did a better job than others. I think Final Fantasy 7 actually did a great job of like making the world have like a
structure,
social dynamic structure going on. But with this one, it really does feel like my real world. This feels like with the cars and modern stuff, it's like the chocobos are the weird thing. Like that's something the prompter gets excited about because it's outside the norm because we all have cars, right? And I like that it feels like they're going from like the West Coast to the East Coast. Like there's big cities over here, there's big cities over there, there's a couple things in the middle, but I like the dissonance because it feels real. Like these guys that are from the capital over here, now they're just in the middle of nowhere. People are just middle of nowhere. People doing middle of nowhere things. So they're not being so much story elements in that stuff. Makes sense in my head because I'm like, that's what a road trip is. You're just kind of going through and like what's happening in New York wouldn't be mattering to somebody driving in the middle of the country, you know? And I kind of like that as they hear these radio transmissions or start to get updates as things are happening about what is going on in the bigger story. It's cool. And I feel like their dynamics between each other change and like keep going, where it's like, I went from being like, oh man, okay, I don't know what the hell's going on, to, oh shit, I'm invested in this. And I don't really even need to get to the next cutscene because I just kind of care about what they're doing together at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I've noticed that people have been saying, some common feedback that I really just super disagree with, is that people are saying, well, story was never important in Final Fantasy. And so this game's no different. And I'm like, you guys are just wrong. You're just wrong, And that's one of the things that gets me with these anonymous people, these tweets and on forums and stuff that I'm reading. And I'm like, but the story always did matter. And I think that goes into in the great ones. And I think that goes into the character development and how that all kind of ties in together. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that not so much in the 8-bit era, because the 8-bit NES games or Famicom games had no story. But by the time you start, or a small story, 3 had a story, but 4, and not so much 5, but 6, and then 7, 8, 9. I mean, these games had, in the PS1 era, these games had stories that were intrinsically tied to the world and intrinsically tied to the characters. And they actually really did thrive on some sort of dissonance. In 4, Sid and his airships and the fact that he was an engineer was super weird when you put him next to Edge, who's a ninja from like kind of a ninjutsu kingdom, and then you put him next to Tella, who is like a gray mage or whatever, and all these kinds of things. Like, they didn't really fit together with all this technology and with the nature of Golbez and all these kinds of things, but it worked. And in 6, we always talk about the steampunk aesthetic and how Narsh had, the steampunk and the engines and the steam and all that kind of stuff next to Figaro, which can go underground into the sand and all that kind of stuff. But they were using, Edgar was using auto crossbows and chainsaws and stuff like that. But then they were in a world of magic and with swords. But they had these big cities like, the capital of the empire where Gestel was, where it's like super modern and stuff. And I always liked that. And 7 again was just like that, with Midgar and the major corporations and the Turks and all these kinds of things kind of juxtaposed against what was going on in Cosmo Canyon. And there was always this weird, like, they somehow seamlessly put these disparate elements together. And that's the only thing I hope is with 15 is, and again, it's so preliminary, and I'm trying to be open-minded about it, where I hope that they're able to do that, because again, to build on what Greg was saying, I look at this world and I'm like, I just don't understand what the hell is going on here. Like, it doesn't, it's not congruent. But maybe that's not what's important. But we shouldn't say that it was never important, because it was always important, actually, in all the great Final Fantasy games. And I see that kind of stuff going on a lot right now, and I'm like, you're wrong. Like, that was what was important. That's all we had, like in the 16-bit era, were the stories and the characters. We didn't have these pretty graphics in these open worlds.
Well, when we were talking about this on PS I Love You, and I was saying that, and I don't think that the story doesn't matter. I think the story in Final Fantasy is definitely one of the most.
I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I'm saying these people.
No, I get it, but like I was one of the people that brought this point up. I was just saying that I don't think that that any of the stories in Final Fantasy are like immaculate storytelling, like perfect, right? And I think that with this, I need to beat it. Like, I can't speak on the story until I know.
Yeah, I'd like to do another topic.
Yeah, we definitely should.
Yeah, these are initial impressions.
Yeah, for sure. But to me, like, what does story mean? Like, are we talking just plot? Are we talking narrative? Are we talking about the overall, like, the world and all of that stuff that goes into it? Because I feel like with this, there is a strong story told, but at the end of the day, the plot of it is there's a dude and his friends that are essentially doing a bachelor party road trip to get him married. There's a whole bunch of other political shit on top of that, but that's the plot, right? And I think that it being that simple leaves room for more things to happen. And so I'm excited. Like, obviously, there needs to be a boss fight at the end. What's it going to be? I don't know at this point. I have no idea. Like, where's it going to come? Like, what is the bigger threat and all this stuff? And even as I play, like, more and more things, like the familiar Final Fantasy elements start to come in, like summons. How are they involved in this game? I think it's really unique and interesting. And I'm like, oh shit, like that's. I thought the Final Fantasy X did a really good job with the Aeons of making them a huge part of the story. And with this, it's like I appreciate that this game. I feel like most things feel earned. Like, when things that are familiar to you are introduced, it's like, oh, that's a good twist on something that we knew. And as you keep going, it's like it starts to feel more and more right. And the world, I feel, starts to feel more and more connected and works with all the other elements really well.
Yeah, but I will say, I think you're right, and I think I just haven't seen enough of it yet. That the painting's still being painted for me. So I mean, who knows like what the final product's going to look like to me. I think a lot of people are telling me that I'm going in with kind of a more negative mind. I'm like, no, but I'm trying not to be too excited about it. I'm critical of the game. I'm critical of everything I play. I want to like this game because I like Final Fantasy. I'd love to be reattached to the franchise the way I used to be because it's a very important franchise to me. I will say that the one cool thing that it does, and I don't think it means it in a narrative sense, but one thing that I've missed in recent Final Fantasy games, specifically starting, I think, more with 12 and 13, but it really did start even before that. I actually think it even started with, in the PS1 era to a degree, not really, was having these characters that did a specific thing of a specific class and that cannot be altered. So Portman and Palom are mages. They're not going to ever be front row characters that are going to fight. And for people that don't know, you put different rows for characters in old Final Fantasy games to protect them. If they're weak and they cast magic, you don't need to be in the front to do damage. And I liked that kind of dynamic, and we've kind of lost that as things became. Actually, 6 was the game that started to make them really agnostic. Well, that's not true. 1 was really the game that started to make them agnostic, but any of the class-based ones, 5, for instance, but 6 with the Esper system did give us a bit of both because it was like, well, Locke's a thief, and Terra's a magic user, and Setzer's a gambler, but they can all use the exact same set of magic based on the Espers, and so it gave this kind of dynamic kind of way of taking what they give you that can't be altered and altering it anyway, and I think that that's pretty cool. And what I like about what 15 does, to the point of the photography and the fishing and all of this, is I like that they have their differences in combat, obviously, but also they have their different outside interests, I guess, that do add a dynamic to their characters, but also drive some element of the story, whether it's the fishing element of the story or whatever. And I like how those things are graded. I like deep systems, and I think Final Fantasy can learn a lot from the deep systems of Western role-playing games, and I think that they are. So there's a lot to like about the game in a preliminary sense, too. I'm just kind of surprised with how much I do like about it. That it doesn't have its hooks more in me. Like I was telling Greg and I was making him laugh, but I was serious. I'm like, I have The Last Guardian and I have Final Fantasy 15, but I actually want to play like Letter Quest Remastered. Like that's a game I know is fun and I'm having fun with it on my Vita.
Colin
and
Moriarty.
And I'm like, but like you have to go with what's most fun and what draws to you, right? And I'm not doing that. I'm actively not doing that, but there's also no shame in that. And I'm just shocked with I think it's because I see these elements on like different parts of the painting that I'm like, I like all these parts, but how do any of them connect? And that's like the one thing that I'm investigating as I continue to play the game tonight. And I think we should definitely do another topic on this, specifically because with this and The Last Guardian as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about next week, these are just historically important games that are coming out within very close proximity of one another. And so I think that as people that have been, some people that watch this or play games, a lot of people that probably watch this play games weren't even playing games or interested in games when this game was announced. And I don't think that they realize how important this kind of moment is for us, even though we've become very sardonic, and at least I have very deprecating about it. And I didn't really even believe it was ever going to come out until this year. Like I really did believe they were going to end up canceling both of those games. So there's something to that as well, where there's an extra loaded element to it. Because I was a junior, I think, in college when it was announced. And now I'm 32. So there's an extra element to it. And so people think like, well, you want to not like that. People tell me like, you want to not like it and you want to be hard. And I'm like, actually, it's the exact opposite because I want the whole circle to be complete. And it actually was worth it all along. So we'll see how it goes.
So far for me, it has been. I mean, I've been down on it throughout the years in a very different way than you, but just in the sense that like I was worried about it and I was worried that it wasn't going to live up to what I wanted from it. And I think that it hasn't lived up to what I wanted, but it's giving me something different that I love. And I think that that's awesome. The music is amazing. The animations, it reminds me of Inside in a lot of ways, where like I'm constantly shocked at the unique animations in given situations where I'm like, man, like there was so much thought put into so many little things that it really does start to add up. And I appreciate it, and I want nothing more than just go back and play it, even though right now currently I am fucked and underleveled and in a really bad place where spoilers that I don't want to say things are happening to me that are making my life really hard, but I want to get through it, as frustrating as this part is.
So you got to the wedding mini game.
Yeah, exactly. This
so
isn't Final Fantasy X.
The one thing I will say moving forward is that I hope, if 15 is a reaction in a lot of ways to 13, and I think it is, clearly. It wasn't obviously to begin with. It was supposed to be a 13 game, but it
was supposed to come out day and date with 13.
So I mean, it wasn't in its element on PS3 it's supposed to be that way. But I think that a lot of the things, a lot of the depth, a lot of the added nuance to the game is a reaction to 13. My hope is that 16 is a reaction to 15 in the sense that I want antiquity again in Final Fantasy. I want old things, you know. And one of the cool
Don't think you're gonna get it, Colin.
well, I don't want it to be like 9. Like 9 was a fantastic game. I think 9 was awesome. You can make the case I think that 9 is better than 8 and 7, and certainly better than 8. But 9 was a very obvious reaction to everyone's like, what is this? This was when I think Square and everyone was a little more listening to the reactionaries like me that were like, well, 7 was great and 8 but like, why do they have guns? You know, like this is a little weird. And so they're like, well, they gave us 9, and 9 was like a very fucking classical style Final Fantasy game in the PS1 style. And I don't want it to be quite that extreme, but I want to see what their vision is with this modern take on Final Fantasy in terms of technology and in terms of game design, which I think is a huge step for them forward. But what does that look like with the old aesthetic? Like, I think that would be interesting and cool, you know, to see swords and knights and dragons and, you know, all that kind of stuff, but in that medieval kind of setting. And I hope I hope we're far away from that, and maybe we never even get it, but I hope that we do end up getting that, because that when I see modern role-playing games like this, I'm like, that's fine, but it makes me yearn for something a little more familiar. Again, that glove that feels right.
But when was the last time the glove felt right? When was the last Final Fantasy that was Final Fantasy?
9.
Okay. And that was 15 years ago, you said?
That was 2000, yeah. 16. Almost 17.
Yeah.
Then they were banging those things out really quick, too. I mean, it was, you know, 7, 8, 9 came out within 3 years of each other.
Yeah.
So it was you know, they were certainly, you know, a little more than that, but they were certainly, yeah, you know.
Things are just different. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to is video games are in a different place. So what is Final Fantasy? It's like, all right, well, what is Super Mario? What is Uncharted? What is Tomb Raider? Like what is Metal Gear? And Metal Gear Solid 5 is I can't believe I haven't brought that up yet. Like, this game is the Metal Gear Solid 5 of Final Fantasy.
Yeah. And
that's, you know, a good thing and a bad thing. But like, I'm having a great time with it because of those things, because of the good of it. I'm not having a bad time of it because of the bad things. So I just think that, like, when you look at like something like Mario or Zelda, for example, they're old school 2D versions and 3D versions. They're different games, but they're still Mario. They're still Zelda. And I just think that we're in a different era now with Final Fantasy where, like, we can't get those games anymore because that's different, you know? And that's where things like Bravely Default come in, where it's like, that is what those are.
Right.
And they are trying to give you more of that. But the Final Fantasy is a AAA franchise, you know, and I feel like it needs to be this type of game to have any chance at success.
That's the point.
I think both critically and financially.
Yeah, because you figure if to go back to the Final Fantasies that fit like a glove for you would be to go back to games I have no interest in playing. And as it is a AAA tentpole, this is what they need to make out of Final Fantasy. They want new players like me to come in.
Yeah. Anyway, again, I'm excited to go back and play it.
Me too.
I'm excited to keep talking about it. I can't wait to beat this game.